I will talk for 20 minutes. I'm planning to do 3 things. I will talk about the resources that the network has. I'll then talk about how the Secretariat is monitoring what is happening, and then I will finish by looking at what the Secretariat is planning for the next stage. So 3 things. And I've left the front slide on to just say a few things about the first slide. There's some important things to note. The first one is it's about quality assurance. It's not about quality. Every country has their own quality and their own definition of quality. That's absolutely fine. This is about how you assure the quality you have is maintained. So you can all have different quality, but it's the quality assurance process that is the one that gives trust between countries. So the focus is on quality assurance. I should say that the Secretariat has been working on resources since 2009. So that gives you an idea of how long it can take to find examples of good practice and build on those examples. As Kuhn said, it's also important to recognize this is a framework. It is not a quality assurance system. It's a framework, and countries are invited to develop their own system in line with the framework. So it's not imposing a European approach, it's offering a framework for people to look at when developing their national or even regional system. And the final thing to say on the first page, the Secretariat. It does sound very grand. It's probably important to say it's 3 people. Okay? And that's quite important. It's 3 people. Sean Ferrick, as most people will know Sean, who is Irish, Arantxa, who is Spanish, and a new colleague, Beata, who is, I believe, Polish. That is the Secretariat, and that's important because it is a Secretariat that supports member states in developing things that work for them. So there's not a central bureaucracy imposing anything. It's a Secretariat that helps member states do what works for them. And that's quite an important principle. So we have a website. I will do a short demonstration in a minute. That is the main website. Obviously, it's wonderful, but it is in English. Okay, and that is sometimes a big problem for many countries. But it is a website. There's 1 or 2 things to say about the website. Everything that is on the website is developed by member states, European stakeholders, and other countries who work with the member states. So this is developed by the members of the network, and it works usually through working groups or other joint activities. And you can imagine the challenges of getting agreement with 28 countries on guidance and advice on a quality assurance framework. But that's what the Secretariat seeks to do, to enable member states and others to work together to develop resources that are useful. So there are compromises, and there's different approaches reflecting the different systems across Europe. And I should say finally, before moving on, it's important for everybody to recognise that this is a voluntary framework. Member states and stakeholders select those parts of the framework that are useful and they find helpful. There's no compulsion, it is voluntary, and so we have a select what works for you. If it doesn't work, don't do it. And that's quite an important principle because it enables us to get agreement across member states on the materials that are on the website. So I would give you a couple of slides. This one is fairly typical. You can see at the top of the slide typical web pages which illustrate individual member states. We've had lots of arguments about our flags because some of the flags are bigger than the others and that's caused a problem, and some are not member states, and so there's been fun and games with the flags, but we have information on all member states. Just in the corner on the bottom, I've put down some of the activities that the network does, because not everybody wants to join a working group. Sometimes people want to be involved in research, sometimes they want to do just an information event, find out more, sometimes there's peer learning activities. So again, the Secretariat organises a range of activities, trying to find things that are attractive to each member state and other members of the network. Okay, so a range. If you only do one thing, then you often find people are unhappy with you. So we try to do a lot of different things. Just to show you a couple of the main sites. So one of the early pieces of work we did was to develop, based on European experience, two main websites. One of them is on what we called building a quality assurance approach, and this was for member states who were just starting the process. So building is often linked to the planning and implementation parts of the quality assurance cycle. So there's a lot of resources on building a system. Secondly, we developed monitoring a system which is based more on the review and evaluation of what's happening. So two approaches, and then we have everything in blue on the site is at system level. So there are many activities at system level, and then secondly in green there's many activities at the provider level. So things you could do to build and monitor at both system and provider level. So that's one of the main resources. But things moved on. More recent developments, responding to what member states want, are these two sites. The first one is what we've called aligning a quality assurance approach. Essentially, every country has its own quality assurance approach, and many countries have ISO systems, European quality management systems. They have many existing frameworks. This was to help you look at your current system and see if it aligns with the EQAVET framework. So we've given advice to member states on comparing what you currently do with EQAVET and how to do that. And then finally, we developed something on work-based learning. 2 years ago, there was a big pressure in the member states to say more about work-based learning. We haven't said enough about work-based learning, but we've started, and so there is a detailed set of case studies and web pages on that. So those are the more modern or more recent things. I'm going to finish the first section now with an attempt to give you a short demonstration of the website. To help the translators, we've printed a copy of the pages I will use, which you've got as well, so that might help. So if I will now go to the presentation or the website. So as I say, there's the main site. We're redesigning it at the moment, but it's quite complicated. So let me just. So that's very typically the site, which is looking at quality assurance at the system level. By the way, there's 600 pages on this website, so I'm doing 6 of them. But I'm not doing all 600, but there's a lot of information, and the Secretariat decided to leave everything on the site rather than remove it. So when it's updated, we still leave the old material there because some countries want that. So this is very typically the site for the quality assurance at the system level. You can see here that we've got the idea of building a system, and you've got there the idea of monitoring the things I mentioned earlier. So if I go just as an example, if you look at how you monitor your system, you can again get an introduction to the idea of monitoring, and on the left-hand side you can see the idea of evaluating and reviewing your system, so the sort of measures that people would use. And so if I typically go into evaluation, you see that one of the key things for evaluation is the idea of using indicators, because indicators give you a way of measuring how you've done, and Kuhn talked about the 10 indicators, and all this is based on the different indicators. One of our biggest challenges, and you can see it here, was to find examples or case studies of what's happening. I think we've now got about 150 case studies on our website, which explain what different countries and different vet providers are doing to develop quality assurance. So on our section here we have case studies, and you can get a chance to look at case studies based on topics, or you can get case studies based on individual countries. It's always unfortunate that Austria, I'm not going to go into the case studies, but Austria is always first. It's done alphabetically, but in this particular section of different countries, you can see down this side that there's case studies on a large number of countries, and across the whole website, as I say, we've got about 150 different case studies which look at quality assurance. Okay, and I'm going to finish finally with the website with one other more recent development about work-based learning. I just need my glasses to find it on the screen. So you can see over here we've got the one of something on work-based learning, and again we have, because work-based learning was something that was very important for member states, we've done a lot of extra work on work-based learning, and I've chosen this final screen to show you one of the quite key principles that came up when we developed resources. Member states were very keen on the idea of developing a concept called building blocks. So here, throughout the website, you find the idea of building blocks. These are not in the recommendation. They are different. They're based on member states' experience, and they're about what do I need to do to make a quality assurance system. And in work-based learning, we have 6 building blocks. And what member states are saying with the stakeholders, if you look at these building blocks and address them, you've got a good chance of developing a well-performing quality assurance system. So throughout the resource, you've got the idea of building blocks, ways of creating systems and approaches that work. So that's what the Secretariat does. I'm now going to go back to very briefly look at how the Secretariat has monitored the implementation of EQAVET, and then I will finally finish by looking at what the Secretariat plans for the next year. Okay, so you have these slides in front of you, so I'm not going to do the detail. I'm going to show you some of the key messages that have come up from our monitoring. So the monitoring is the Secretariat inviting member states to say what they are doing. So it's voluntary. Member states, and to be fair, quite a lot of other countries are also responding to the monitoring activities because the network is bigger than the member states. So in the blue on the left, the simple question is, does your national system align with EQAVET? And what's interesting is 3/4 use the quality assurance cycle, 2/3 use descriptors, and 70% use indicators. What that tells me is it's voluntary. They choose the parts of the framework that work for them, because it's not 100%, it's voluntary. So at the system level, member states and others are saying that's what we do. And then we've asked them to say whether their vet providers have a quality assurance approach that uses a quality assurance cycle, the descriptors and the indicators. And again, you've got all sorts of different things happening across the network. So the principle is monitoring shows people do what works best for them. So we ask similar questions about, do you have a common quality assurance approach for vet providers? So does every vet provider do the same thing? Is there a common approach? And if there is it compatible with the framework? For some it is, but only for 3/4 of respondents. Same question being asked at the system level. Is your national system compatible with the framework? Well, only half of them say yes. So all these messages, and again, you've got similar monitoring data on work-based learning. So are you using a quality assurance process linked to EQAVET for work-based learning? And again, you can see the figures for yourself. All this says is the monitoring says it's voluntary and we do the bits we want. So that's quite an important principle. And I will finish now on the last section, which is to look at what is the Secretariat going to do to support member states and national reference points this year. We have a strategy. As number one on that strategy indicates, and it's the point that Kuhn mentioned, we're looking at developing something called EQAVET Plus. The title may change, but it's looking at how do you fill the gaps for those areas of the EQAVET framework that were not well covered as shown by the evaluation. The second part of the strategy is to strengthen mutual cooperation between the national reference points. And then again, as Kuhn mentioned, the third priority is the review phase. So you plan, implement, evaluate, and finally you make changes through review. And it's that final making changes that we will do more work on. And my last slide, some of our actual activities in the coming year. We've started with the EQAVET Plus working group. As Kuhn says, we've had the first meeting. The second meeting is in 2 weeks. We have, I think, about 18 member states working with us on the EQAVET Plus. This year we're also updating all the information that we have on member states' quality assurance system. Every member state has been invited to update the information on our website. Thirdly, the monitoring of what is happening, that will be repeated this year. So we will do another exercise to find out what's actually happening through the monitoring exercise. We've agreed 2 peer learning activities this year. One will focus on the quality assurance of learning outcomes. I believe that's going to be in Poland. And the second one is going to look at detailed arrangements for using Indicator 5. And I believe that is taking place in Wales in the autumn. And then finally, we're having an EQAVET forum, which is the new thing that Kuhn mentioned, and it's a more general open event, and I suspect there will be 150 people from different organisations across Europe coming along to find out more about the EQAVET framework. So thank you for that. That's the summarised 3 sections, something about our resources, something about how we monitor and what the monitoring says, and then finally something which gives you an idea of what we will do in the next year. Thank you.